Welcome to the Best Kept Secrets podcast, where we share our best kept secrets about life, love, God, and everything in between. Hi guys, welcome to episode 4 of season 4 of Best Kept Secrets podcast, where we share our best kept secrets on God, love, life, and everything in between. First of all, if you're watching this on YouTube, you've not subscribed, girl, what are you waiting for? If you're listening to us on Spotify or any of our other audio platforms, thank you for joining us today. I usually let my guests introduce themselves, but before I let him introduce our guest today, introduce himself, this is someone that we have wanted to have on the podcast for so long, I think since season 1. We've talked about you so many times in different episodes, and now you're here. And I'm so blessed and I'm so happy that you're here. Please introduce yourself for the peeps.
Yes, my name is Eric Thimba. I am a child of the living God. I run a ministry or lead a ministry called Adulam Ministry, which is just a community of believers that are devoted to the word, devoted to prayer, devoted to service, and devoted to fellowship. I also have a tech company called MOOC Africa, and we are in ticketing and payments in Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda. I currently live in Kampala. That's the reason why I haven't been able to make it to your...
Yeah, I know it was not out of malice. I know you were away.
I was away, and I used to get all these clips of people telling me, oh my gosh, you were mentioned in so many times. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm super excited.
Yeah, we really have mentioned you quite a bit.
Yes.
I don't know if you know, but you probably know, but you've been so instrumental in my journey and my walk with Christ. I've called you in many times when I'm in crisis and I'm just like, oh my God, Thimba, what do I do? Help me. And even when I actually remembered when I launched Epiphany, the day I launched, I called you and I asked you to pray for me because I was feeling so anxious and all of these things.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah, even when I lived in my previous house, you came, you prayed over my house. Like, you have been so instrumental in my walk with God, and you've been such a blessing in my life, and I know to so many other people's lives. When you started Adullam, I think I was on there. I watched like every episode. I listened to every episode. And I learned so much from you and things that I still today live out in my life. So of course it was a no-brainer that we were going to have you on here. And I talk about you to like everyone. I'm always telling people, I learned this thing from this guy called Thimba, blah, blah, blah. So I'm happy that you're here to share now with other people.
That's what's up.
Yeah. So today we're talking about, walking with God and being in a journey with Christ, and how do you even build a relationship with Christ? What does that even look like? I know we have some baby Christians listening, or some people who are not even Christians and they're wondering or they're curious. So take us back to when you became a Christian or when you were born again. I know it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been like, man.
How long has it been again? You told me 20. How many
23 years.
23. That's more than half of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually a little bit more than that. 23 years to the time when I was baptized. That's usually when I count from. But when I actually kind of made that confession of faith, I think it was probably 25 years ago. So like a quarter of a century.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
So like, take us back to that.
So, how it happened was I'd gone for, so I grew up at Nairobi Baptist Church. That was the church that I used to go to, and they used to have this thing called Easter Camp.
Okay. How old were you at this time?
At this time, I was, I want to say 16, 17. I've just given away my age, eh?
Yeah.
Do the maths.
Okay. Do the math.
Do the maths. So I think I was about 16, 17 years old. And He's definitely 17. Anyway, so I went to this Easter camp, and the reason why I went for the Easter camp is because there's this guy who we used to live in the same neighborhood, and he told me, my guy, the baddest babes go for Easter camp, right?
I knew you were going to say that.
And I was just there like, bet, I'm in. So I really went there to just like...
For the babes.
Yeah. It's like God knew. God is just like... How can we? They were there scheming. Yeah. How do we get Thimba to come
to church? To the camp.
Throw some to babes. So I end up going, and while I'm there, I have this really great time. And there's this guy. His name was Gilbert, and he approached me. Just kind of was just like, preached the gospel to me, and was like, I think you should become you should become a believer. And I was just like, you know what? Absolutely. The thing that's so interesting for me, though, is that in as much as that was like the moment that I remember becoming a believer, I always just felt like I knew God all my life. It's now when I think in retrospect, I feel like God raised me.
Okay.
Because I remember when I was younger, it's only now that I'm able to recognize what that was. But I always used to remember that there used to be this person that used to talk to me. And used to tell me stuff. He used to teach me how to walk. Literally, I'm not kidding. Like,
really?
Like, I remember, again, like this voice that used to just be like, walk like this. When you talk to people, look them in the eye. And I used to receive all these instructions. But of course, I just used to think it was my own thoughts, But as a kid, when I think back on that, I'm like, wow, this is like... I now look back and I'm like, oh, that was God all along that was like talking to me. And one of the things that my aunts also told me, like, is they told me how when I was a little kid, I used to ask some really, really profound questions about God. And they always used to wonder, they used to be like, well, how does this kid even know? Like, where is this coming from, So for me, I just feel like, I just feel like one of the things that I really appreciate about my faith is that I do recognize that I come from a very strong lineage of faith.
Okay.
My father is a believer. My grandfather was a believer. My great-grandfather was an evangelist, one of the first converts. And so I just feel like my faith is like it's like, when God talks about 1,000 generations, like I'm in that lineage. That the faith that I carry is not just out of a personal decision. Okay. It's also because I come from a heritage of faith, which is, I think, true about so many people. So it's almost like I could just never really quite run away from God. You get me?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I just could never quite... I've always just had an affinity towards God and his things.
Okay.
For as long as I can remember.
That's so interesting, because if I think back to my own walk or journey, I can't say that. I don't come from a lineage of that. So yes, my parents took me to church and whatever, but I can't say that my mom or my grandma or her grandma or whatever, yes, I know they were Christians, but actually my mom recently told me that she only gave her life to Christ a few years ago. All this time I didn't know. I thought my mom was a Christian because she would come to church with us. She'd take me to church even when my dad wasn't there, because my dad is the one who's a bit more in there. So she only told me, it was only a few years ago. So I don't have that experience where I feel like I could not run away from God. But as you were talking, I remembered my mom was telling me that when I would go to church, there would be these hymn books that they leave on the, what are they called? The benches, right? In NPC, Karen. And I used to, when I don't go to Sunday school, I would write on all of those books, and I would say that this belongs to Sharon Mwangi, and how I'm going to be a pastor one day, and I'm going to be like Pastor so-and-so, whoever was the pastor at NPC at the time. And I was 6 or 5.
Amen.
And she was just telling me that I wrote on so many books, and she would tell me, stop writing, this is not our property. I would write property of Sharon Mwangi, blah, blah,
Wow.
pastor, this. So I can say even me, even though I don't feel necessarily that could not run away from God, I feel like from a really young age, I knew God.
Amen.
Maybe I was not aware. I wasn't, because I was a baby, I was not aware, but it was there. So now that, okay, you have this encounter with this guy, he tells you, you say, okay, now I'm a believer. What does your life now look after you've said that?
So at the time, I remember I was in high school, and I was at St. Mary's. And St. Mary's at the time was such a, like, the school for, like, the cool guys.
Oh, I think it still is.
It still is, eh?
Even when I was there, when I was in high school, it was still one of
Yeah?
those. Yeah.
Well, at that time, it was like,
Yeah.
the cool, man, we were so cool. Hey, I'll tell you, if you're a girl Saints, you're the coolest guy. And so I go back to school, and I'm a believer, and it's like, it's literally like this whole contrast of the world and like my faith, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it really did take a while, because in as much as I was a believer, there was a period in which I felt like I was just kind of doing my own thing, you know?
Okay.
I wasn't really in kind of like an active pursuit of God. But the thing that was really cool, though, I think there was a really great foundation. There was a hunger that came out of me. I remember soon after high school. So as soon as I finished high school, so I became a believer in Form 3, Form 4. I was in St. Mary's, whatever. Then I remember during that gap year between
Uni and
high school, I remember so vividly how I spent that holiday reading the Bible from cover to cover. And I remember just how amazed I was. I was like, this is such an entertaining book. And mostly the Old Testament. I
Yeah.
was just there like, what are these stories? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes, they're like, and I couldn't stop, you know, like I was so
intrigued.
you know. So I would spend hours on end. I used to sit on this low desk in where we used to stay. There used to be a servants' quarter. And I used to just sit there and just read the Bible. And I feel like that was like the foundation that like set me up on a whole other like trajectory. But then the great thing that I feel like I had also at the time is that I had really great mentors.
Okay.
Spiritual mentors who kind of encouraged me, who walked with me, and who actually also helped me realize that I had a gift in teaching. So the first time I ever preached was during that gap year.
Really?
Yeah. So
you were like 17,
I was
18,
like 18. I was like 18 years old. And that was the first time like I actually like got to like teach, and I realized how much I loved it. Like I absolutely loved teaching. And I thought, you know, just based off of everyone's response, I was always like, wow, like you guys actually like the way I like
The
talk
way I'm
about the
talking,
Bible.
yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, cool. You know, so that was like, I feel like the foundation for me was, I had a good solid foundation.
Okay.
I had really great mentors. And not only just that, like, and which I find like, I don't know if that exists now, but like I also feel like I had such a great community of believers around me.
Yeah.
So like being a believer was so cool. Like we used to do such fun things. Like we had all these like Akina, I don't know if you know of this guy, DJ Moz.
Yeah.
Akina, all those guys were like my homies. You know what I mean? So
Okay.
we used to do all these
Yeah.
like funkies. We used to go preach in high schools. You know what I mean? Like it was just such a like,
It was fun.
it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So meaning that like I had such a great community of guys that, you know, I don't know if that's like the other day I saw on TikTok these guys who they were doing a Christian nightclub or something like that.
I saw it as well.
You saw it,
yeah.
And I thought that was so cool because
But the people in the comments were upset. Yeah.
The Pharisees, very upset. The Pharisees, I'm sure, were so mad. But the thing that was so interesting about that is that like I vividly remember growing up doing stuff like that.
Okay.
Because we used to have, I mean, we didn't call them night. I think it's the whole nightclub thing that makes guys like,
it's how we're calling
it's at
it.
night.
Yeah.
It's like
fun.
Club.
Yeah.
Why would you have fun in Jesus? Why are you not suffering?
Yeah.
Why are you not suffering for Jesus? But we used to do all these like funkies. We used to have like, you know what I mean? Like we used to have gigs that we used to blast. You know what I mean? Like, and there was so much fun. Like, and I feel like those moments were so pivotal in like that. I didn't spend a lot of time doing dumb stuff. Okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I was almost, in a sense, it's like I was ring fenced.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until like I went to the US for university where I felt like my faith kind of like, I was in a Christian college, but I was partying all the time, you know? But I feel like when I was here, like I had such a cool community of like young Christian dudes that we used to go and like do all these fun stuff.
Yeah.
And so...
Yeah.
I don't even know which tangent I've
taken. No, it's okay. And actually, the last episode we had with Mike Mushiri, he was actually saying how important it is to have community, to not do the walk with God alone, because, you know, that's when you start feeling swayed to go to certain places or do certain things that you really shouldn't be doing because you feel alone.
Yeah.
And I've seen it in my life when I have my little community of girls and we do God things together, we go to church together, we do worship nights together, we do all of these things together. Christianity doesn't feel boring. It doesn't feel like, this chore, this thing that I have to do. It feels like I'm excited to go to these places. I'm excited to have Bible study because I'm doing it with my friends and, you know, it's fun and all of these things. So I'm glad that you brought up the going to uni thing. So now you go to uni, you're in the US, you don't have your community anymore. So how does that impact the way your life shifts?
Oh, I think it had a huge impact. And I love that you talked about community because you know, like I said, like with Adullam, one of the key things is, you know, devoted to the word, devoted to prayer, devoted to service, and devoted to fellowship. I think it is incredibly difficult to sustain a healthy faith without community, without fellowship. It is so hard. It talks about that the devil is like a lion, you know, seeking whom he may devour. You know, if you look at that from a very kind of practical perspective, the most vulnerable, like, prey is one that's alone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I just think that even in terms of just, you know, life things, believing, like the thing about community that it does is community is that thing for where you begin to realize that you're not alone. Like you're going through something, then you share and it's just like, oh my gosh, me too. You know,
yeah.
and the amount of comfort that comes from you realizing that it's not a weapon fashioned against you. You know what I mean? It's like it's an all-inclusive attack.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, when I go to the US, like I'm not with my community, so I'm building a new community, and we're in college, and you know, college is all about like, you know, the party life and whatever, and I was really good at it, you know. I was such a fun guy, Mr. Fun Guy, you know what I mean? Like even straight from freshman year, like all the guys who are older used to invite me for all their things. I don't know what it was. So here's the thing for me about the US that was super interesting is that when I lived in the US, I didn't have any race consciousness because I come from a country where I am majority.
Yeah, we're all
black.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then not only just that, I'm also like a Kikuyu. So I'm like the white person amongst black people. You know what I mean? Amongst us, I'm like the white guy.
Yeah.
So I had no race consciousness. And I found that to be quite fascinating because it's not until I left the US that I knew that black people and white people don't get along.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was there for 7 years. And
really?
It's not until I left.
Then you looked back and you're like,
yeah, I was just like,
that was weird.
That was like racism.
Yeah.
Oh, because I was having this kind of, I honestly, when I lived in the US, I had this great experience. Like everybody loved me. Like I used to be invited for all the plans. Like they always used to, and I always used to find it's only now in retrospect where I realized that they always used to say this thing. they were like, they'd always explain who I was, right?
Okay.
Almost like to explain who's this black guy.
Oh,
and I didn't
why
know
is he
that.
here?
Yeah, why is he here?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, this is our friend, he's from Kenya. They'd always make sure for people to know I'm not like the other black people.
You're African.
I'm a special black person.
You're not African American. You're
exactly.
from Africa.
I'm from Africa. So then everyone would be like, oh, then I'd be like, so I didn't know that was like racism until later, because they'd invite me for all their plans. But I just feel like the thing that was super dope is that I was going to a Christian college called Eastern University. That's very much about missions and about social justice. And so a lot of the classes that I did and the thing that I was studying there was political science and theology.
You studied theology?
Yes.
I'm just finding this out now. I never knew that. Yeah.
I think they used to call it biblical studies.
Okay.
Anyway. So I did a lot of like again, faith was a thing. You know what I mean? Like I've never quite, for me personally, understood the concept of backsliding.
Okay.
Because for me, even in times when I was like wilding out, like I was still praying, I was still talking to God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You were still
like I was still that guy who like I come back high, but I'll still pray. You know what I mean? I still be talking to God. There's one very kind of wild experience that happened. There was a time where I was in the US and we were in Florida, and we had gone to a strip club in Florida. And when we get to the strip club, I'm having this conversation with this guy, this friend of mine, and it was such an engaging conversation that we were having. And we were talking about, I don't know what we were talking about. And I remember being seated at the bar and our backs were to the strippers. So we weren't paying attention to what was happening behind us. So we're having this really like intense conversation. We were probably talking about God. Like, I think if you know me, I think if you know me,
only talks about God.
Anyone who knows me knows my favorite topic in the world to entertain me is to talk about God. I love talking about God all the time. So probably anyway, we were probably talking about something very interesting. So we talk, we're having this conversation, and this lady comes up to us, and she comes and she's like, thank you so much. And I'm just there like, thank you for what? She's just there like, she tells us about this experience that she had because of some black men did I don't know what to her. And she's just like, you know, today the way you guys have just, you know, engaged and you're not paying attention to what's happening behind you, but you're just here. And she just like, it's really like moved me. And she's just there like, thank you so much for everything that you're doing. And so at that point in time, we just start talking, and I realized that she was hurting, you know, and there's and I remember the reason why I'm telling this story is because I remember when I left just thinking, Yani God, there's no place you can just leave me like to just be out here chilling. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like how David says, when you go to the depths, even when I go to the depths of hate,
when I
you
make
are
my
there.
bed in Sheol.
When I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. I'm just there like, you're trying to tell me, like, even that place, you be there with me.
Yeah.
There's a video that I saw once of this babe, it was a TikTok, of this babe who was in a club and the DJ was playing a Maverick City song, right? And she was rolling her eyes, just being like,
why?
Like, why are they playing this song in the club? And I remember when I saw that video, I just remember thinking, let me tell you, if I know God, there's a person in that club that he was talking to.
Yeah.
They went there, trying to hide.
Yeah, it's just like, I need a break.
I don't know about it. And I'm sure, I'm almost 100% certain, knowing God the way God is, there was like a person that was in that club that was, and I think that he wanted to speak to. And I think what I love about that is just how, it reminds me of that story of the sheep, how he leaves the 99 to go for the one. Yeah. And it just, to me, it's just, I love how relentless how relentless God's love is towards us. Like, it's so, like, he literally comes to search us out. You know what I mean? Like, he's that dad who comes to the club. He's like, he's like,
shutting down.
It's okay. You don't even need to leave. I'm sitting here. We have a drink. Let's have a drink. Let's talk. So that was like my college experience. Like, I felt like there were so many moments in there that, in as much as I was kind of being wild and doing my own thing, I still also felt God there, that he was walking with me, guiding me, leading me. Then I came back.
Yeah, so when you came back, when you came back, do you now like reconnect with your community? How do you now continue your walk with God?
When I came back, I didn't come back because I didn't graduate. So I didn't come back with like in a way that I thought was honorable, with a degree, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of like shame around that. I just felt like I had squandered my opportunity. I felt like I hadn't, made the best of my time. And so when I come back, I didn't immediately re-engage with my community.
Okay.
I just kind of found a new like set of friends and would just continued. Like, I went through a period of what I considered to be just rock bottom,
Okay.
I just feel like I got to a place where I literally hit rock bottom, which I genuinely thank God for, because I feel like that's the time when it's almost like that was my Moses burning bush moment, where God tells me what he wants me to do.
Okay.
So that was like, when I came back for like 2 years, I used to tell people I was doing blah, blah, blah. I think I used to tell people I was in wind energy or something, renewable energy.
Wind energy?
I know, renewable energy.
You like made up something.
I made up something that I was doing in the US.
Okay.
But I really was just like
figuring
bumming.
it out.
But I wasn't even figuring it out.
You're just bumming.
I was in the pits. I was in the pits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you, because I've had a similar pits moment, and I can say that's when I had my first proper encounter with God as an adult. I actually did not give my life to Christ at an altar, like with an altar call. I probably did when I was in high school. Every time in high school they tell you come to the front. Me, I used to go. I just
every
used to
time,
go.
Yes.
Every time I
got
go.
saved many times.
I got saved many times. I used to go pray the prayer. Sometimes I wouldn't go, but I would pray the prayer when everyone else is praying. But I can't say that I really knew God or I had an encounter with God until I was in the pits a few, not so many years ago. That's when I can say, okay, that's when I said, God, my life is yours. Take it. So in the pits moment, what is this encounter you had with God? What was your burning bush, if you can elaborate and tell us more?
So I don't know about the timeline, because there was a period there where I don't know if... So I also, during that kind of period when I was in the pits, I also joined a church. I used to go to Finger of God. Remember the controversial church?
Done for Estarunga's husband.
Yeah. I was deep inside.
How did you end up there?
Hey, that's a whole other story. My sister actually used to go there. So she's the one who invited
Washuka?
me. No, Wamboi. So she invited me to the church, and I ended up just coming, and I loved it.
Okay.
To be honest, for the most part, it was a really dope church. Like, it was super
Was
dope.
it a cult?
It wasn't I don't know about cults. But at some point, it became weird, of course, right?
Yeah.
And I was there when all that stuff happened. Like, I was literally observed everything happen as it happened. Now, what was happening during that time, coincidentally, because I was also like that was part of the period when I was in the pits, where now I was just like a church guy, right? Doing church things, but I'm in the pits. I'm trying to figure out my life. And so what happened is I decided to go on a fast. And during that period when I was on that fast, it was just a real kind of desperation of like, God, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm headed. I don't know what's going on with my life. everyone around me is flourishing. I mean, at this point, I think I'm in my late 20s, you know. In 2010, how old was I? That's 14 years ago. So I'm like 28. So I'm really, and you know, I have friends who are just, everyone around me is like making moves, you know. Then me, I'm just over there, this guy staying at, literally staying at my sister's place. Sometimes I'd go stay at my folks' place. Like, I wasn't doing anything. And so I get into this time of prayer and I'm talking to God about my life. And God, I have this really profound moment where God reminds me of this story my mom told me when I was being baptized as a kid. Now, what happened is that when I was being baptized as a kid, my mom only intended to call me Thimba. Like, even when you go to my birth certificate, the name Eric doesn't appear. So when I was going to be baptized, the priest asked, "What's his name?" And my mom says, "Thimba." And he's like, "No, but he needs a Christian name." And she asks, "What's his grandfather's name?" My grandfather's name was Elijah. And at that very moment, the priest is like, "We'll call him Eric," and then just baptizes me.
Oh.
So it was the priest who just decided to call me. Who gave me the name Eric. And so God reminded me of that. And he reminded me of that in the context of one of the things that you notice in the Bible is whenever God wants to start to do something in a person's life, he changes their name. You know, Abram to Abraham, Jacob to Israel. And you begin to see this trend of like, you know, Saul to Paul, like when God is wanting to do something significant in a person's life, he changes their name, you know. And so God reminded me of that moment. And I went and I started to think, to look like, what does the name Eric mean? And the name Eric means rich ruler. But in the Hebrew, Arik, which is lion of God. And I had already the name Thimba meant son of a lion. So for me, the thing that what God was ministering to me at that very specific moment is that he's called me to leadership. He's called me to be a leader. Now, at this point, I'm in the pits, right?
Yeah, so you're like, leader to who?
Leader to, what am I leading?
Yeah.
But I remember that specific time he says to me that I want to use you to inspire people towards greatness in Christ Jesus. And that was I remember that so specifically. And he began to minister to me how he would do it. And he began to tell me, Thimba, I will raise you up and I will set you apart. And you will become, I will make your life like a magnet to draw people to me. And to inspire people towards their greatest potential in Christ Jesus. That they live out their greatest potential in Christ. And all these things God was ministering to me when I was at my lowest point, where he's telling me that I'm going to be a leader, all these things. And why that was such an important, pivotal moment for me is because from that point forward, I always knew that I had been called into leadership. So meaning, even when we were starting our company, I'm equal partners with my business partner, but I knew I was meant to be the CEO. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I knew, like, anytime, ever since that point on, like, I always just knew that, like, whatever place God plants me, I'm meant to lead that place. So that, in a sense, gave me an identity, which I think for any person, like, the ways in which, like, the thing about identity that's so profound for me is I always think about and why I think identity is such a critical thing. And there's no one who can give you identity other than God, because he's the one who made you. You get me? Like, it's like you can't go and ask someone else to define who am I, and he's the one who made you. And the thing that's so interesting is that there are things that are inside of people that they don't even know are there, but the manufacturer knows that it's there. Like, he knows what he has put in each and every one of us. And so that sense of identity, like, I think a lot about like Jesus in the story where he goes and he's baptized. This is in Matthew 3. And as he's baptized, it says that as he comes out of the water, that the voice comes and says, "This is my beloved son, in whom I'm well pleased." Jesus hasn't done anything in his ministry at this point. And then you go now to Matthew chapter 4, and it says that he's led into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil, meaning that the Spirit leads him into the wilderness. And when he's in the wilderness, the thing that is so interesting is that he has this, you see this very profound encounter with the enemy. But the thing that lets you understand how important identity is that you realize that the real kind of bedrock of the temptation, or the ways in which Satan is tempting Jesus, is that he uses this phrase, if you are the Son of God. If you're the Son of God. If you're the Son of God. And the thing that you realize is that literally just the few verses before, here is the Father affirming his Son's identity. And immediately after, that's what the enemy comes for. Because anytime as a person, and especially as a believer, when you entrench your identity in God, you become unstoppable. It says that as soon after he was tempted, it says that he goes out in the power of the Spirit, and now he begins to proclaim the message of the kingdom. Everything, I dare say, in terms of impact, is on the other side of identity. That when you begin to really, and that identity comes from God, when you begin to internalize the identity of, I am God's beloved child, and even before I do anything for him, in me he is well pleased. When that begins to become entrenched in your life, the first thing you'll see is many encounters and temptations that will challenge that identity. And as soon as you overcome those things, it's almost like you enter into a new realm of a faith experience, because everything is predicated on your identity. That's the one thing the enemy wants to take away from any believer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the thing is, sorry for this tangent, because I just feel so strongly about this. Because I just feel like what happens, I find, with a lot of people is that there's just a lot of guilt and shame that people carry. And there's this kind of like, the story I think about often is the story of the prodigal son, which really should be the story of the loving father. Because the thing about this guy is that he leaves his father. He takes his inheritance and he leaves. And when he comes back, his whole mindset is, because he has no revelation, like he has no quite an understanding of the love of his father. So he comes back, and his whole thing, his whole speech coming back is, I'm not worthy.
Yeah, it's okay. I can be your servant.
I can be your servant.
Yeah.
And the dad is just like, no, bruh. Like, give him give him new robes, give him the ring of authority. Give him sandals, which at that time only servants didn't wear shoes. So the sandals was a sign of him being like, no, you are my son, you are my child, you're mine. And the thing for me is that and what's interesting about that story is that there's also the older son who never leaves. He does everything the way his father wants to.
By the book.
Be done by the book. Blah, blah, blah. And the thing that's so interesting, he also has a very profound encounter with his father, where he's jealous about the dad throwing a bash for his lost brother.
Yeah.
And the thing that's so interesting is that this son, the father comes and says to him, but son, don't you know that everything I have belongs to you? So what you realize is that both the one who left and even the one who stayed, they seem to have an identity problem. For both of them, even the older son, the one who did everything, he thought that it was his performance that was earning him his father's love. And he doesn't realize that everything the father has, he already has it. So he's here trying to earn something he already has. And then there's the thing for this other guy who his problem is that he comes and his thing is, I'm not worthy. And the thing for me, Sharon, is I just feel like there are just so many believers who are trying to either, one, earn the love of the Father, or two, the reason why they are inactive or they are dormant or they don't feel like they can do anything impactful is because they don't feel worthy.
Yeah.
And that worthiness doesn't come from some action or activity. That worthiness comes from you hearing the Father say to you, I love you. And not just that I love you, I approve of you. And I am so pleased with you.
Yeah.
And this is without you having done anything. You know, I think about it from the context of family, like in terms of what do you do? Like, how much more can you earn your mother's
love?
to be what's the thing that will make you the most son that you can be a son? You know, you get me?
Yeah.
And I just feel like there's so many people just carrying so much like that thing for like. Anyway, I'm sure you have something to say, because I just feel so strongly about this. Like the other day, I was having a conversation with someone, this guy, and he, you know, very randomly at lunchtime, and he says to me, he's like, because people always, I think, because they know I'm a faith guy, they always just, it's
ask
like,
questions.
yeah, ask me questions, but faith questions, like on the dime. It's not even before hello. It's just like, so
what do I do about this?
Yeah. So this guy, he says to me, you know, I just feel like I've grown so far apart from God. I haven't been to church in such a long time, and I just feel so distant from God. And you know, I remember, Sharon, just being so puzzled by that phrase. And I get it. Like, I understand when people say what they mean by that. But what's so interesting to me is there seems to be this sense of, like, for me, I'm distant from God. And then the next thing he says is, I haven't been to church in a long time. I remember just saying to him, I'm like, my guy, do you know God is just right there? Yeah. Just say hi.
He's not just in church only.
He's not in church. Like, you're waiting to go to church to meet God. God is here right now. Like, the thing that you're looking for when you're saying God is far, he's not far. He's here. He's literally, hi, God. That's how close God is. There's literally not a single person or anything that is closer to you than God. And so I found that so strange, because I was like, you're waiting for an event or a situation. But for me, the fundamental part is, it's that prodigal son mindset where I don't feel worthy. And there has to be some, what's the performance I need to do to feel accepted, or to feel like I can talk to God again? Like, you mean I can just, what do you mean I can just say, hi God?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, that's, what do you, I have to, there has to be some ritual. They has to go to church, do praise and worship. Then they have to do like an altar call. Then I go in the front. Then at that point in time, so now I'm waiting for the opportunity. Me, when I go to church, that's when now it's over. That's when now me and God will connect again, you know? So anyway, I don't even, sorry, I took it to another tangent.
I feel like you're actually even speaking to me, because I have those same struggles with, I actually randomly saw on TikTok about this babe who was saying how, I don't know if you know attachment styles.
You're the one who taught me about attachment styles, actually. Yeah. You're the one who taught me about this,
I'm a believer of attachment styles. So she was saying some of us have anxious attachment styles with God. So the way we live our relationships with God is just always feeling like you have to perform, or always feeling like you have to do something to be sure that God loves you, right? So you're always asking God, like, not really, you might not be verbally asking God, but the way you live your life and the actions that you live out are questions of, God, you're sure you love me? You know, and I read this post Jackie Hill did, and she was saying what changed her life trajectory was when she realized that God doesn't just love her, he also likes her as a person. And I don't think that a lot of us think that God likes us as people that God looks at us and he's just like, imagine you're my daughter, and imagine I love you, and I don't really care about all those other things that you're so concerned about in your head. I like you as a person, and I've called you here, or even without the calling, without any of those things, he likes you, he loves you. So I'm still in that journey where I'm still trying to deconstruct my relationship with God and trying to not perform and all of these things, because I grew up a parent pleaser, right? So people pleasers were parent pleasers before they became people pleasers. So for me, I was taught that if I performed well in school, and if I did this, if I did that, then I was worthy of love. So because I grew up in a home where I was a parent pleaser, of course my relationship with God is going to be a God-pleasing relationship, where God say, I did this thing for you, and remember that time I gave that guy that 50 bob on the street, or I did this, so now am I a good child? You know what I mean? So I'm now trying to unlearn those things, where I'm just like, even if I just existed and if I was just a bum and I did nothing, God would still love me. That's what I'm trying to like now slowly, I mean, it's a journey, but that's what I'm slowly trying to unlearn and relearn. So now let's go back to post uni. You're now you are in this like pits. Do you ever get out of the pits, and how do you now transition after that? And what does your walk with God look like?
God just starts to build up my life, you know. I think one of the most, I ended up getting a job.
Was it a 9 to 5?
Yeah, it was a 9 to 5. With a great man of God. And he just starts to build up my life, and begins to take me on this journey of just, step by step, things just start to build up and build up and build up. And from strength to strength, I start my company when in 2000, and I think officially we launched in 2015. And that's a whole other trajectory. I think one of the things that's been so incredible about being an entrepreneur is, my goodness, like that to me is like the practical of faith.
Yeah.
Because and let me tell you something, honestly. I am always so amazed at people who do entrepreneurship without God. I'm like, how?
Yeah,
like
how?
My guy,
How?
like you just like like during the lows, you're just strong.
How do you even make decisions? And
Yeah, like where do you get wisdom from? And not even just that, like where do you get like, so for me, the thing, my profound experience around work and God has just been, to me, prayer many ways felt like meetings, where I'd go and talk to God about like as simple things like hiring. I need this kind of people. This is so interesting. I've been reading the book of Exodus. And it's just so interesting how when God was wanting to build the tabernacle, he gives Moses very specific instructions on how to build it. Yeah. And then he also tells him, there's some specific guys
I want you to,
that I have literally anointed
to do
with
it.
the skill to do this work. They're very skilled. And he goes on this whole hype journey of why these guys are excellent at what they'll be able to do for me. And I remember just looking at that and just being like, I'm like, this is so dope, because I felt like as I have involved God in my work, he's also always sent me skilled people to do the work. One of the things that's so profound is when we were bouncing back from the pandemic, which was in 2022, when we now began to be like, okay, now we're back.
We're back, yeah.
Of course, I had no staff. And
you had let everyone go.
I'd let everyone go. And so I get this guy, his name is Jonathan, which was so funny. And Jonathan is this guy that comes on board, and he's very timid, but he's very skilled. And he doesn't even know how skilled he is. he's so skilled to the extent that he was, for almost a year, he was the only developer that I had. And in that year, our system has never run more smoothly with this one guy. And that was the time when I realized, it's so funny that his name is Jonathan, because there's this story in the Bible which talks about when Jonathan goes with his armor bearer to start a fight with the Philistines, right? There are two against a whole army. And he says to his armor bearer, let's go and pick a fight with those guys, because the Lord is able to save whether by many or by few. Meaning, we don't have to be many guys.
Yeah.
When you really think about it, like 2 guys against a whole army, that's really crazy, right? And it's just so insane how God literally comes through. And in that same story, I get a developer called Jonathan, and God reminding me, Thimba, whether you have many people or you have very few people, you will still do great things. And it's so incredible that in that year, we did so much more than when I had a team of like 19 people. With just one guy, you know, and it's just so fascinating. So to me personally, I don't know how, anyway, so I start my business, we do the thing, it's super dope. And I feel like throughout that whole journey of, for me, the real practicality of my faith I've seen it in the work that I do, you know, and I just feel like that's in between there. In 2016, I remember it was November 9th, 2016, Reverend Gowi reaches out to me, and he tells me, Thimba, I think it's time for you to get back on the pulpit. Now, when he talks about the pulpit, he's talking about the last time I was on a pulpit.
You were 18?
I was 18 years old.
Oh, yeah.
So now this is 2016.
Time. Yeah.
Like, it's a long time. Now, I have to be honest with you, Sharon. The way I was living my life at that time.
Yeah.
I was that guy for like,
pulpit.
I was not giving pulpit. Let me tell you, in fact, it was so funny. At that time, I remember the first time I was at Nairobi Chapel South. And I remember I was so, when Gowi asked me to preach, it's almost like I was in a state of madness. Because I was just like, yes, I'm ready. But inside my heart, in my head, I'm just there like, nigga, are you mad?
Yeah, what are you? Why did you
mad.
say yes?
Like, you think you can be on a pulpit?
Yeah.
My friend, you think you can be on a pulpit, mister? And it was so bad that I did not tell anybody that I was preaching that Sunday. It was like a secret.
Like if you are there, you are there.
Yeah, if you're there, you're there.
Yeah.
I didn't want anyone to be like, Ati, you're preaching where? Thimba.
Yeah.
Thimba, the one you were with? I don't know. I don't know if that guy can be the one to be the one preaching. And the thing that was so fascinating to me is I'm so grateful. You know, I just feel like, again, going back to the identity thing, I just feel like God has entrenched that sonship identity so much in me that I really, honestly, Sharon, and I really mean this, I really, genuinely don't care what people think. Me, I'm just going to preach the gospel.
Yeah.
I can't help it. What you think about me, or how or, you know, as
how you perceive me.
As a Christian, you should. That, and I thank God for that. And so for me, like, the thing that happened for me is that journey of beginning to start to teach, and very publicly to teach. It's like changed my life. It changed my life. Like, me exercising, it for me, it felt like I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I used to always hear these basketball players, because I love watching basketball, and they talk about, like, you know, this, I've always loved this is all what I've always wanted to do all my life, like, da-da-da. And they would always talk about what they love. And I remember always thinking, I'm like, man, what do I love? And when I got onto that stage and preached, I was like, this is my thing. This is the thing that I love to do, and I want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to preach the gospel. This is all, like, I belong here. I belong on this pulpit. This is my thing. And so I never looked back since then.
That's so wonderful. I feel like I didn't know all of these things about you. So even me, I'm just learning and I'm hearing all of these things for the first time. So from 2016, first time on your pulpit, to now 2024, how many years has that been? 8?
2024.
Yeah, 8.
8 years. Wow.
8 years of,
Wow.
just
that's amazing.
being in your sonship and being on pulpits ever so often, and having Adullam now for 4 years of those 8 years.
Yes, we just celebrated 4 years yesterday.
Yeah.
No, the day before yesterday, the 31st of March.
So how have the last 8 years been?
Amazing. Honestly, and I just feel like I have experienced such incredible joy serving God. Genuinely. Sharon, I live the most incredibly peaceful life. The epitome of my life my life is just, if they'll say what my life is peace. Jesus says that I leave you a gift, peace. And he says, the peace that I give, the world cannot give.
Yeah.
I live in peace. And I just find so much joy in doing God's things. It excites me. I get a lot of fulfillment from it. It's so beautiful to see the kind of impact it has on people's lives. But to me, to be honest, even if I didn't have any impact to yeah, I'm just I just love it so much.
Yeah.
I actually, in fact, interesting that you say, Adullam, the way it started was, the way I started Adullam, so in 2019, I was in the office. I'd gone to get some tea, and I was walking back to my desk. And in between that journey, between the tea and walking back to my desk, somewhere in between there, God speaks to me and he says to me, Thimba, I want you to start a church. That thing threw me off because I wasn't thinking about no church. That's how I knew it was God talking to me. Because me, I was just thinking about my tea.
Yeah.
And so I'm walking and I stop and there's a table right next to me. So I put my tea down and I sit down and I'm like, church. So my first answer to and this is generally my default position with God in general. My default position with God is yes. Because I'm always just kind of even when the Goey asked me to preach in 2016, in as much as inside out, I was just yes. But my thing is, I'll give you yes, but I don't know how to do such a thing. And I remember just saying, I'm like, God, I'm down, but I hope I don't know how to do such a thing. And I could almost, in a sense, feel like God being perfect. You know what I mean? It's almost he's you exactly, yes, that's the whole point. I wanted someone who doesn't know, who would come with their own, from my experience of, church planting. This. So in my head, I sat there and I'm just thinking, so do I start looking for land? What does that even look like? So the first person I called was Reverend Goey, was the first person I told. And Goey, if anyone knows Goey, Reverend Goey, he laughed. He has this laugh. He just laughed. He laughed for 2 minutes. And then he just said, let's pray, man. And I was just okay, cool. Then the second people I told was my parents. And they blessed me, and they were, my parents are incredibly supportive. But I didn't know how to do such a thing, right? Now, what's so interesting is, when the pandemic happened, right? I'll never forget it, because it was the 13th of March. And the reason why I remember is because I was running a ticketing platform.
Oh, yes.
Everybody.
There was an event.
Events. We had 100 events on the platform.
Yeah.
And now just chaos, complete chaos. But the time I was doing a series at Mavuno, South Sea. And I remember just being so upset, because I remember thinking, now they've closed the churches. I'm not going to preach.
Yeah.
Now, the thing for me about the preaching, again, it wasn't changing people's lives. I enjoyed it for myself. Even if I had one person or zero people, I could preach to nobody. I literally, there are many stories that probably people will never know of situations where God sent me to places I never told anybody, where I'd go there and there'd be 4 people. There'd be there was a time I went somewhere, another church I was invited to, there were literally 4 people. And I preached. In fact, what's interesting is one of the episodes that you guys did, and you talked about, I think Cargo talked about it, there was a time where we met.
Oh, yes.
The thing that's so interesting is that day that we met with everyone, I preached the message that I had preached that morning at that church to 4 people, right? Which changed all these people. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just that thing for like me. I just love preaching. Like I okay, 1 people, 2 people, no problem. I don't mind. Like to be the best sermon in the world, you know. And I just you know, I just remember just being so distraught about not being able to preach. And so at the time I had a meeting with a friend of mine who's a producer. And so I shared with her and I said to her, I'm like, man, I just can't believe I won't be able to like preach, you know? And I was like, I've always thought about doing maybe some online stuff, you know, maybe some whatever. And she just said like, let's do it. And at that time, obviously, no one was doing anything. So even my pal who now I went to as a videographer, his name is Wamai, we went to him and we were like, yo, we want to do this thing. And him is just like, I mean, it's not like I'm doing anything.
I have time.
I have time. So that's how Adullam started. Do you know it wasn't until a year later of doing Adullam when I realized, I was like, wait a second. Is this that thing God was talking about in 2019?
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is that church thing that God was talking about. You know, for me, Adullam has been like, you know, like how it talks about in manna, the manna from heaven, how the people called it manna because they were like, what's this?
Yeah.
That's literally manna is what's this? I look at Adullam and I'm just like, what's this? Because Adullam, actually the name Adullam comes from 1 Samuel 22, which is the cave of Adullam that David ran to find when he was running away from Saul, who was trying to take his life. David ran to the cave of Adullam, and it says that those who were in debt, in distress, and discontent gathered around him, and he became captain over them. And these are the people who then later on became the mighty men of David, right? So when his kingdom was established, these are the people that he basically became his guys, the people who he ruled, who helped him rule. What's so interesting is at that time when we started Adullam, I was in debt, I was in distress, I was discontent, and literally it was like our whole community, the people that gathered, we were all in debt,
in the same
distress.
boat.
And the thing that's so interesting, the name Adullam, what's so fascinating about that name is that God gave me the name Adullam. Do you remember the part where I told you that period when I was 18 years old and I was seated reading? I have a book that you would write notes on. I went and looked at that book and I saw there Adullam.
So you knew it since 18.
It was somewhere, but I didn't. When we starting it, and I was like, "What do you want to call it?" I was like, "I think we should call it Adullam," but I didn't know that I wasn't of the consciousness that God had already given me the name ages before. So literally, Adullam, when it started, I didn't know what it was until much later, where I was just like, "Oh, I think this is that church," and it's been so interesting because if you had told me, Sharon, that you can do. There's a guy who called it digital discipleship. I'd have told you impossible.
Yeah.
You need to, meet people, whatever. And also, you are very instrumental in a lot of things we've done at Adullam. I don't know if you know this.
No. I mean, kind of.
There's been a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, so for example, the Tuesday meetings that we have, the Bible studies, that was because of a conversation I'd had with you.
Yeah.
And I remember being so amazed that you and your girls met every day. To do Bible study. I was like, every day.
Well, almost a year.
I was like, what? I was so embarrassed. I was just like, and me, I was just like, I want that too. So that's how we started the Tuesday meetings. There's one other thing that you had told me of. Oh, do you know the thing that's so funny? One of the reasons why I was one of the first people to buy this journal is because we were actually literally in the midst of designing a journal, a prayer journal. And so when I saw you do it, I was just like, oh my gosh, God, this is so amazing.
Yeah.
It's like, we'll do hers. Let's work with Sharon's, you know? That's how even I told the community about like your books. I hope they bought some.
They did, yes.
That's amazing. So
that's how it's been the last 8 years.
The last 8 years have been, Sharon. So like, on top of that, like in between there, in 2002, at the beginning of 2002, God spoke to me. I was on a prayer walk, and God spoke to me and told me to move to Kampala. It was a very shocking word, because I was, again, just like usual, I was just there doing my thing.
Living your life.
Yeah, we did. We're just talking about other stuff. And then God begins to start to minister to me and starts to talk to me about stuff. And then somewhere in between there, he tells me, Thimba, I want you to move to Kampala. And at the time, I only knew one person in Kampala. So the first person I called after God spoke to me was my business partner. And I told him, I'm like, I think God is calling me to Kampala. He laughed because he was like, that must be God who spoke to you, because up until that point, I mean, if it was me telling me to go somewhere, I'd have probably been like, move to Rwanda or South Africa.
Somewhere
like vibes.
Yeah.
Kampala, I always thought Kampala was so like shags, you know? So when God spoke to me, as 2 months later, I had wrapped up my life in Nairobi, and I just moved to Kampala. And it's just been the most miraculous, vibey, dopest experience of my life. Probably, if I was to say of my experiences, it would be like
up there.
It's top 3 best things. Like, following God pays off. Like, it's like my whole life just revived. And the thing that's so interesting is, it's fascinating how I now kind of understand why, even for many people, like there are many people who, for spiritual revival to happen, God relocates them. You know what I mean? Like, he just be like, leave where you are, go to a new place.
Yeah.
And it's because you now thrust into, for me, like, there was a lot of stuff around moving to Kampala that was profound for me, because, I think for a long time I had begun to kind of lose out on my identity, in the sense that I began to think that what I did defined who I was. So I always thought of myself as, Thimba wa Mook, and that's how people used to refer to me.
Yeah.
Hey, Thimba. And it was so fascinating to be in a country where I know nobody.
Yeah.
And I'd have interactions with people, and they would be like, man, you're such a cool dude, like, it's so nice to meet you. And I'd have all these great experiences, and none of these people knew who I was. It's so funny, because in Kampala, if you go and ask them about Thimba, they'll be like, who's Thimba? So I started to use the name Eric when I went to Kampala. And so one of the things for me that happened was, there was such a long period, like, of isolation, where I didn't know people. I just used to be in the house and hang out, just talking to God and whatever, where I felt like God began to, it's like, remind me of who I was, to remind me of my identity in him, and to remind me that none of these things that I did defined me, that he is the one who defines me.
Yeah.
And his definition of me, first and foremost, is that I am his son. And in me, he's well pleased. One of the things, I feel like I'm over talking. Maybe just ask something. Sorry. Maybe I can go on.
It's
my
fine.
Gosh.
It's
I
okay.
can go on, man.
Atta, we're supposed to wrap up soon.
Yes.
Funny thing is, when you told me you were moving to Uganda, I was not surprised. I was like, sounds like something Thimba would do. And when you told me God told me to move to Uganda, I was just like, yeah, it sounds like something Thimba would do. So it's so nice to see someone, who lives like, how Abraham, God told him, take your things and move to this place. I'm going to take you to this place. He doesn't know it. He packs up his things. He just goes. You know what I mean? That's so profound, because I fight. Like, me and God, we wrestle. Before I say, okay, fine, God, I'm going to do it, I'm not an instant yes like you. I'm not like, okay, fine, God, I'll do it. I'm just like, but why? And then how? And then when we get there, what do we do? Then who do I call when I get there? So I have the same experience you have with Adullam with this podcast. I never wanted a podcast ever. I was so content and pleased with having my fashion business, having my Instagram. Someone years ago in 2021, I think, asked me, "Oh, Sharon, would you have a podcast?" I was like, "No, ew, why?" I was like, "Why?" Because everyone is doing it, Ama. And then she was just like, "Yeah, I mean, if everyone is doing it, see, then it means that there's something there. There could be something there for you." I was like, "No, me, I'm okay. I have no desire to do any of that." And I kept feeling like, God was literally calling me and telling me, do this thing, and I fought it for a real, I think, almost a year, just me and God going back and forth and I'm so glad that I finally said yes. And I finally, I asked a lot of questions. I was like, okay, God, how am I going to start? Who's gonna do my videos? Who's gonna edit for me? So many things. And I was just like, he just asked me, like, what do you have in your hand?
Amen.
Like the Moses thing, what do you have in your hand? And I was like, okay, I'm going to shoot in my house. I bought one microphone like this from Amazon. I called a guy I knew, and that's how I started. So my season 1 of the podcast is all shot in my house, in my living room. One mic. We barely had any guests. I think we had 3 or 2 guests that entire season of 10 episodes, and I just talked. And every week God would give me something to talk about. I never lacked content. I never lacked something to talk about. And he was just like, just go talk about us, like us in different ways. I talked about money, relationships, so many different things, and always made sure to talk about God in that, because he's the one who asked me to do it. So there's a beauty in saying yes. Also finding your identity in God, like you were saying. That's also still a journey that I'm still navigating with God. But I feel like you've shared so many profound things, and I'm just like, if I had not said yes to God, then would I even be having this conversation with you right now? Probably not. If I was still wrestling with God about it, this would not be happening. This season 4 would not even be a thing, because there would not even be a season 1 to begin with. These journals would have never come to life, right? So thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for sharing everything that you have shared, and sharing your journey and your walk with Christ for the last 23 years. I know someone has gotten something out of this conversation, and just thank you.
Thank you so much.
All of that was to say thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you.
I'm glad you said yes.
I'm glad I said yes as well. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. If you're watching us on YouTube, if you're listening to us on Spotify or any other audio platform, thank you for listening. You'll see us or hear us in our next episode. Bye.